Okay.
Good morning, commissioners. Just give us one moment here to go ahead and get our stream up and running and then get started. Okay, we're good to go. Diana, take us away.
All right. Good morning, fellow commissioners and staff. Mendocino County Planning Commission meeting September 15, 2022 is coming to order. And can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Wiedemann.
Here.
Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Jones.
Muted.
She's on the phone.
Maybe call somebody else, please.
Okay.
Come back to
Chair
you.
Purnell is absent by prearrangement. Commissioner Babini.
Present.
Commissioner Paulin.
Here.
Wonder if we can get her attention.
Can you send a chat message through this with the panelist way or no?
We do not have a chat feature enabled on this meeting. Yeah.
Diana, you want to send her a text or something?
Sure. If I can get. All right, now I shut everything off so I wouldn't be interrupted. I'm sorry. Oh, there she is. All right.
Doing roll call for Commissioner Jones.
Roll call.
I wonder if she has her sound off.
Commissioner Jones, are you able to hear us?
We're waiting.
Perhaps. Yeah. Can you hear us?
Can't hear you. Okay, repeat it. Marie, Commissioner Jones, please repeat. We can't hear you.
Commissioner Jones, hear us?
So I guess none of us can hear anybody.
Oh, we got you now.
No, everybody's good except you.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
That's
We're
the
doing
problem
roll-
with taking a phone call. I was unmuted, but I hadn't turned my sound up. Sorry.
We're doing roll call. So Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, present. So sorry.
Okay. Okay, now that we've done roll call, and now we're going to go on to the rest of the order of our agenda for today. The Mendocino County Planning Commission meetings will be conducted virtually and not available for in-person public participation pursuant to the provisions of Government Code Section 54953 and the recommendation of the Mendocino County Health Officer. Meetings are live streamed and available for viewing on Mendocino County YouTube page at www.youtube.com/Mendocino County Video. In order to minimize the risk of exposure during this time of emergency, the public may participate digitally in meetings by sending comments to PBS commissions at mendocinocounty.org or orally via telecomment in lieu of personal attendance. All public comment will be made available to the commissioners, staff, and the general public after processing by staff and can be viewed as attachments to this meeting agenda on the Planning Commission agenda page. To submit public comments via telecomment, the Zoom link and associated instructions can be found on the agenda for this meeting. In order to ensure that you are called upon to provide comment, please complete the telecomment form found at www.mendocinocounty.org/government/planning-services/meeting-agendas. Since we just conducted roll call, we'll move to agenda item number 2, and discussion and possible action, including adoption of resolution of the Mendocino County Planning Commission finding that the state or local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing in connection with public meetings. Are there any public comments on this item?
There are no attendees on the meeting, and we did not receive any correspondence.
All right, can I have a motion to adopt?
Can I just ask a quick question before we take a motion on that? Has the Board of Supervisors begun meeting in person yet?
They are meeting in person as a hybridized approach. So some supervisors are there in person, others are remote over Zoom. So they have been doing hybridized meetings.
Would that be an option for this board?
One, I have put in a request previously, and it has not yet been that we're able to utilize the board chambers, which is where this commission typically meets. Staff does not have the capacity internally to support a hybridized approach. So it would either be going back to fully in-person meetings or staying remote on Zoom. And that's primarily because it takes multiple staff members to run a Zoom as well as being within the chambers room. And we do not have that staffing.
I know that at our last meeting, a member of the public requested that we go back to meeting in person. And I've heard that preference also expressed from some commissioners. I know that it is a long trek over the hill for our coastal commissioners to do that. But I don't know. I don't know when it's appropriate to have that discussion as a full commission about whether and when we want to start meeting in person again or not.
I will, so I think one of the key factors is going to be making sure that we have the appropriate space in order to accommodate meeting in person. Go ahead.
So pre-pandemic, the Planning Commission did utilize the board chambers, correct?
That's correct.
And has there been some change that makes it so it's unavailable for this body now, or what's the why is it not available to us currently?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that specifically, but it hasn't been opened up yet to other bodies to meet within there. I can't say exactly why it hasn't. There has been rules and procedures needed to be put in place related to COVID-19, but that's a question that's answered above my head.
Would that be an answer for someone in the CEO's office, or?
And I will reach out to the executive office I have inquired in the past, and I'll inquire again about the ability for the commission to utilize board chambers. If that is not available, then staff would have to look into if there are alternative locations that the planning commission could meet, which would likely come at a cost to the department, which we likely have not budgeted for this year, as we had not anticipated needing to find another location. So that's something where I can come back at the next regular meeting with hopefully at least an update on where we're at in terms of ability for the commission to possibly utilize board chambers.
How many people can be accommodated in the room that you're in currently, Julia?
Oh, very few. We have chairs around the table for 7 at the moment. But you have to have a space that is publicly accessible where the general public would be able to come in and would be able to provide comment. And while we have seen, limited public comment, in years past, there have been times where the room has had, 20 to 30 people waiting to provide comment on a particular project or an ordinance, possibly more. So you really do need to make sure you have an appropriate space to accommodate that level of comment and participation.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the audio visual equipment, be able to stream that onto the web so that way folks can view a recording of the meeting or see it happening live. which is what used to happen out of board chambers. There wasn't a virtual participation option, but the video was available to the general public for them to be able to watch and follow along, or to view the proceedings afterwards.
Right. And again, there's not, in terms of the staffing to make a hybridized meeting possible, there is not the staffing to do that, or it's not in the budget to do that, or some combination of the two.
I will say the clerk of the board's office has about 3 administrative staff members that run any one particular meeting. We have 1.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing back, because again, I think I'm all in favor of maintaining caution at the current moment. But it does feel like perhaps we are at the arc of the pandemic where meeting in person might be possible again. I'd be curious to find out if and when and how that might be possible. So thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Jones.
Just to chime in, I'm wondering if it's possible to do some sort of hybrid approach where we have maybe a meeting a quarter in Ukiah where we all go and it's an in-person meeting only, and then maybe the rest of the meetings could be remote. I think there is an opportunity to build collegiality amongst the commissioners that's a little bit lost on Zoom, and also even amongst staff and the commissioners. It's just so impersonal in a way. I don't know. And I would certainly be willing to huff it over the hill once every couple months. I'm sure Diana would be as well, just so we could have an in-person meeting every now and again, rather than making it all either joint or all Zoom. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but just an idea.
Any other comments from other commissioners? I will comment on that. I think it's time we meet. I really do. And I think I'm going to suggest you to our director that you find some funds to have us meet. Or we need a situation where we need to get together as a board. And when we get together as a board, we need it to be public, right? So it's time, I think we have to figure out how to meet. Give us that opportunity. Like we say, we haven't even met, I haven't met 2 of the commissioners in person. So I concur. I think it's time we, I think you hear it from us, Julia, to try to resolve that for us. Okay, now do I have a motion?
Sure, I'll move we adopt the ordinance.
I'll second.
All right.
Just to note the resolution, just for the record.
Yes, for the resolution. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Vivini,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Chair Wiedemann,
Yes.
Commissioner Pollan.
Yes.
Motion passes, or resolution passes.
Right. Okay. So do we have determination of legal notice?
Yes, the item was legally noticed.
All right. Now we're moving on to the director's report, and our director, take it from there.
Thank you, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. I don't have much of an update for you today. I'm certainly available for any questions you may have. I heard the discussion, so I will be doing some outreach on seeing about the commission being able to meet in person, and would hope to have an update for you at the next regularly scheduled meeting. The one other item I do want to note is that at this time, I know we had done some outreach to commissioners about a possible special meeting. I want to be clear that that will not be occurring. So the next meeting will be October 6th.
All right. Thank you. Then matters from public. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking action on matters not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the Planning Commission under matters from the public may do so via email, telephone, or Zoom. For information of each of these methods, call the Planning and Building Department at 707-234-6650 or visit www.mendocinocounty.org/government/planning-building-services/meeting agendas. All correspondence will be attached to the item and made available online on the Planning Commission agenda page. If any members of the public log into Zoom meetings wishing to speak under public expression and have not completed the telecomment form, please use the raised hand feature to allow staff to add you to the meeting. Instructions for using the raised hand feature are found on the agenda for this meeting. Have there been any requests for comment for this public expression?
There have been no requests for telecomment.
All right, the consent calendar, we have none, we do not have any consent calendar, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, that moves us on to the agenda item 6A, our regular calendar, and moves us into case number U 2017-0036, continued from August 18th, 2022 Coastal Development Use Permit to authorize the construction and operation of a wireless communication facility. I'm opening the public hearing and announce the hearing procedures. So what we have here is we could do the staff presentation first and then open, and then we have questions to staff, application presentation, questions to applicant, public comment, final remarks, and by both staff and applicant, and final commission questions to staff or applicant. And then we'll close the public hearing. So staff, take it from there.
Thank you. So for today, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director and Project Coordinator for this project. At the September 1st Planning Commission hearing, the Commission continued this project to today's agenda with direction for staff to prepare an alternate resolution for denial of the project based upon inconsistency with visual resource policies of the local coastal program. Staff has prepared that alternate resolution for denial, and that was provided within your packet and made publicly available on the web. And staff took the comments from the Commission from the September 1st meeting in terms of the areas where they felt the project was inconsistent with the visual resource policies and prepared findings in support of denial, and that's included in the draft resolution. So I am happy to answer any questions you may have, but that's really the update for today's meeting.
Any questions for staff from the Commission? Okay, seeing none, do we have an applicant presentation?
There is no applicant on the line, so I would say we can go ahead and move past that.
And is there any public comment?
There are no attendees available on the line either, and any public correspondence has been posted and made available.
All right. And so any final remarks by staff?
None at this time, thank you.
Okay. Or any final remarks by applicant, but they're not here to talk. So that takes me to the Commission. So do we have, my fellow commissioners, any questions for staff or the applicant? I don't see any hands up. All right, then let's close the public hearing and let's hear from the Commission's deliberation and motion on this matter.
So I'd like to just go ahead and thank Julia for writing a really nice ordinance, a resolution. I think you did a great job capturing the gist of where the Planning Commission was coming from on this denial. And I appreciate how thorough it was. And with that, unless there's any objection, I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission denying a coastal development permit use permit for a 76-foot tall wireless communications tower, which was planning permit U-2017-0036.
Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
All right. And then do I have any further remarks on this motion? If not, can I have roll call votes?
Commissioner Pollan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Babini,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. And now we move to agenda item number 6B for the regular calendar. Discussion, possible action, including presentation by Planning Commission Ad Hoc Committee on short-term rentals and possible adoption of a resolution providing clarification regarding interpretation of the applicability of Mendocino County Code Section 20.164.015 L and 20.024.135 as they relate to the occupancy of a single-family residence as transient habitation. Therefore, I'm going to ask staff, is there any correspondence or telephone calls received on this issue?
None that we've received at this time.
And can I have the ad hoc committee present? And I'm going to ask Commissioner Jones.
Sure. Thank you, Diana. So this has sort of been in the works for a while, and I think staff and county council and the ad hoc committee have gone back and forth, maybe 3 versions or 2 versions on this. I'm not totally sure. I think it's maybe less than what the commission originally directed us to come up with, but I think it's bounded by our county council's determination of what is sort of in the best interests of the county with regard to this issue. And also, and feel free to chime in, Matt, if I'm misstating your opinions. And also just a feeling that we really want to retain this as an interpretation document rather than get into the legislative mode and policy development. And so there are certain aspects of the Planning Commission's direction that will need to get rolled into a land use code ordinance or zoning ordinance update rather than an interpretation resolution, which is what this is. So there's a real distinction between the two. And I think the one thing that came up, well, there was a number of things that got dropped out based on Planning Commission's recommendations. And probably the most important one was the desire to have some sort of on-site presence where there is a vacation rental. So either another unit that's occupied or a business that's occupied, to just sort of keep an eyeball on things and keep activities from getting out of hand and disturbing the neighbors. And so I think that's something that we would need to address in a land use ordinance at a later date rather than an interpretation resolution, which we're focused on now. And so kind of to just give you an overview sense in case people didn't read it or didn't kind of understand what we're doing. So in the past, the staff has interpreted a portion of the zoning ordinance around room and board to apply to single family residential rentals as a vacation rental. And so we're not going to be doing that going forward if this resolution gets passed. And instead, vacation rentals will still have a path forward. They'll just be obligated to get a use permit. So instead, they'll be analyzed under transient habitation lodging limited, which is a little bit larger category that allows rental of more different types of activities. And it seemed to us that a vacation rental fit under this category much better than under renting 2 rooms in a house, which really is not what a vacation rental is. It's renting the whole house. And so what that does is it requires anybody who's wanting to do a vacation rental to go through a use permit process, which would mean they would come to the planning commission and would give neighbors notification that it would happen. And those neighbors would also have an opportunity to send a letter or dial in or participate in the meeting and express their concerns if they have them. And then the planning commission would do its normal is the use compatible with the neighborhood? And as part of that calculation, we always do listen to concerns about incompatibility from neighbors, because that is essentially what a use permit is geared to do. So with that, I think that Diana and I are satisfied with this. We think it does move the needle on the sort of proliferation of real estate acquisition that's resulted in people essentially running distributed hotels in the county where they buy 6 or 7 rental units and turn them into vacation rentals, and essentially they're operating a hotel. I think it will make that much more difficult to happen, but it will still allow people who need vacation rental income, especially if they have, if they're also living on the property, an avenue to get that approved if their neighbors are amenable to it. So hopefully I didn't blab on too much, but I just kind of wanted to give context and consequence for the resolution and kind of the process that we went through.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Since I was part of that ad hoc committee, I would like to just add that I think it was certainly a good exercise to go into and to look at what other counties, the ad hoc committee, we did a lot of research and looked at other counties and what's taking place, because most counties are experiencing this issue. That said, I'm going to, I look forward that we tackle this when we open up the ordinances and look at updating our ordinances. And that'll be down we'll set that up later in this commission hearing today. With that, I'm going to invite any questions and comments from other commissioners. Commissioner Babini.
Yeah, so I just had a question, and it could just be clarity on my end on section E, where it says that it is governed by the inland zoning code. And I was wondering if there's a difference between this resolution solely for the inland versus what we're looking at potentially for the coastal zone as well.
Yeah, so I can answer that if you want.
Yes, Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, so I also just want to express the fact that the inland does not just mean like over the hill. There are huge swaths of Fort Bragg area, Albion, on the coast that are also within the inland zoning ordinance. The coastal zoning ordinance is really just west of Highway 1. And then a few places it goes further inland where there are creeks or rivers that go inland. So I do want to emphasize, if people are worried that, the coast is trying to tell the inland how to do things, this is really an issue for us on the coast as well, especially because so much of the more affordable housing units that we still have on the coast are up Albion. They are up Simpson Lane. They're back up Gibney Lane. They're in the more like not an ocean view areas of the coast. And we are seeing a lot of turnover of old, homes where people either were homeowners or residents getting turned into vacation rentals. So I do want to emphasize that it's a concern of ours as well. So the reason this only applies to the inland area is because this zoning ordinance only applies to the inland area. The coastal zone has a separate zoning ordinance, and the coastal zone zoning ordinance specifically allows vacation rentals. So there isn't an avenue of doing any kind of interpretation in the coastal zone. That said, Diana and I looked at other communities, and there are many communities that are located in the coastal zone, like San Diego, for example, that have taken pretty big steps to curtail the proliferation of vacation rentals. Where you have locations that are big tourist destinations, what you're seeing is really significant turnover of residential housing stock into basically distributed hotels that don't have oversight and are, it's kind of a perversion of zoning in a way. And the Coastal Commission has been open to those changes. And so I think we can also do something similar in the coastal zone here through an ordinance process, but we can't do it through an interpretation process. Again, sorry if I talked too long.
I just want to, before Commissioner Pollan, I'll get to you in a second. I just want to clarify, when we talk inland, we're talking the general plan.
Yeah.
Right? And it's important to kind of state that, the general plan and the local coastal plan. And the local coastal plan actually goes 1 to 2 miles in, right? And it's based on the type of land and view sheds and several things. But for instance, Commissioner Bambini, I'm in the general plan area. My property's 2 miles up, right? So the majority of land in the county is general plan. So just for that, but I hope that clarifies it. Did you have anything else, Commissioner
Just
Bambini?
one more. So the only concern that I have, and when we're talking about these, prioritized mini hotels that people are, buying lots of land and doing that, is that, even in implementing the requirement for a major use permit as a higher expense, that kind of, to me, is the only concern I guess I have, is that you're now limiting that only people who can afford it are going to be able to do this process, whereas some people who maybe are living on site or living next door and they have another unit that they're wanting to rent out to, be able to be financially stable for their family, they're not going to be able to afford this process. And because the major use permit is a higher expense. And so we might be even more than leaning to having these outside folks coming in to do these use permits and take up that housing stock. And so I guess that was my only concern when I was looking at that, is that we might be pushing out the ability for local people to be able to do this process and only allowing them for these larger companies to come in and do it. And so I guess, yeah, that was my thoughts.
So
Commissioner,
okay, I was going to just respond to that if you want.
Well, wait. Commissioner Jones, if you may, I want to get to Commissioner Pollan first. I'll come back.
I can defer to Commissioner Jones to answer that question, and then
okay, go ahead. Then Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good thought, because I think anytime you do any kind of ordinance or resolution, you want to think about not only your intended consequences, but your unintended consequences. And unintended consequences often and sometimes end up being bigger than your intended consequences. So I think it is a valid concern. I would just say that most vacation rentals, produce a tremendous amount of income. So you're looking at probably $6,000 to $8,000 a month, maybe even $10,000 or $11,000 a month. This is way more than what a use permit costs. Right. So I don't think that that's really going to be a barrier for people who want to do this as a way of generating income. One way to think about it, Elora, is it gives the neighbors an opportunity to weigh in. And I think that that is a really important part of planning, especially when you have the potential of introducing a use that could be very detrimental to communities. And so I feel like it's a good balance, because people still have an opportunity to get a vacation rental. It's a little bit harder. It gives the neighbors an opportunity to weigh in. It gives issues an opportunity to be elucidated and understood and explored. And that's what planning is for. It's in order to stop neighborhood, basically conflict in a way, So anyway, that's my thoughts.
I would also just like to add, I think it has to be thought of also as a bit of a business, and it's a business expense. And I understand a use permit is more, but on I see as what people, and I certainly have, I think we all have friends who have vacation rentals. I see what the income is today. So I think that you have to think of it in terms of as a business investment. And that's what I just wanted to add. And now I'm going to go to Commissioner Paulin.
Thank you,
I'll
Mayor.
go, right.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Wiedemann. Well, one is I want to echo Commissioner Bavini's questions and comments, and I think I want to challenge your assumption, Commissioner Jones, about the potential revenue. I think maybe in some instances people are earning $6,000 to $12,000 a month on these, but if you do a quick cursory search of Airbnbs in the Ukiah and Redwood Valley area, they're renting for maybe $100 a night, and that's not. And as someone that's renting one, they don't get all of that money. The platform takes a percentage of that as well. And so, even if you had 100% occupancy on a unit like that, you might be earning $2,500 a month. And so a question for staff is, do we have an estimate? And I know that it varies, but do we have an estimate on what an applicant could expect to pay for a major use permit if they had to apply for one?
Yes, it's $6,000 to $8,000 plus for the CEQA documentation. There's a fish and game filing fee that's due after a project is approved, which is right around $2,600 at this time.
So we're talking total cost of $8,000 to $10,000 potentially for a major use permit.
Correct, which typically has, it can have either no expiration date or it may have an expiration date. So it's a kind of a expense on the front end in terms of obtaining that permit, but doesn't necessarily require that it's like renewed on a yearly basis or anything like that. And then anytime you're operating a business, you would need a business license as well.
Right. I know, and I was contacted by several constituents, not before today's hearing, which is another question I want to pose, but when we first started talking about this months ago, and people were saying they have been having a difficult time navigating the county system to get a business license, even though they've been operating these things and there are no conflicts with the neighbors. And I also just want to state, again, I think that us addressing this issue is important. I don't want to say that we shouldn't be looking at this, but I wonder if we're not crafting a solution that does have unintended consequences that exceed the benefits that this might have, especially if we are going to be pursuing a larger ordinance down the road. And another question would be just, again, these numbers might not be available, but I recognize that the inland zoning area is majority of the county, and it is a fairly narrow swath along the coast that falls into the coastal zoning. But I would be really curious to know how many rental units are there in that coastal zone as opposed to the inland zone. And are we, trying to address a problem in the inland zone that is, either predominantly in the coastal zone or is, there's a preponderance in the coastal zone. So that's a question. I don't know if staff has any sort of information about sort of a percentage of current listings for inland versus the coastal zone. Do we have that, Julia, anywhere?
I do not know. I know that I believe the board ad hoc has looked at that. There's several housing action groups as well that have done some of their own sweeps of looking at sort of information. And I don't know if the ad hoc has any more information they want to add, but the department doesn't have anything specific that I can base any statement on.
So I can respond to that.
Wait a second, Commissioner Jones, just for a second. I also recognize we have County Council's hand up to speak.
If I, Commissioner, or Vice Chair Wiedemann, may I just conclude? I have a few other comments that I'd like to put in.
Okay.
And the last one is about notice of this, that this interpretation could have a significant impact on people who currently are utilizing vacation rentals and are reliant on it. And I sent out a message today to a constituent that had reached out to me just to say, are you aware that the commission is going to be discussing this today? And and they were not. And I just, again, from a transparency and a public participation perspective, I would feel really reluctant to approve something today, knowing that we have, this will affect many, I'm not sure again what the numbers are, but it will affect many people. And we have received no written comment. We have no one here in attendance today. It feels as if we'd be making a decision in a vacuum without hearing from the public. And I am loath to do that. So that's the last thing I want to say on this for now. And I'll reserve maybe other comments or responses to come down the line. So thank you.
And before I go to County Council, Commissioner Jones, I cut you off. Did you want to answer?
No, let's let Matthew speak first.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. County Council, Matthew, you.
So Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, on the one point that I wanted to add on to what Commissioner Jones said earlier in terms of where this is coming from. I think part of the answer to Commissioner Babini and Pollen's questions on how we got here in terms of is this the right mechanism and what can we do here? That comes down to what this action is, and the concern this came forward as a concern regarding a prior planning director determination, and essentially that was kind of self-appealed by the Planning Commission pursuant to that's the mechanism in the zoning code you have for that. So what the interpretation can do is it can see, okay, was room and board a good place to start with or not? And as part of that review, if not room and board, given that there was a reluctance on our office's part to simply foreclose any other avenue for what has been going on for quite some time, where would this be appropriate? So from an interpretive standpoint, the director had placed these kinds of rentals under room and board. And if not there, we looked at, well, where else could it go? And transient have lodging limited is kind of the next level up. And so from an interpretation standpoint, that's where we thought this could go. Alternatively, yes, the commission can make recommendations to the board about legislative actions in which they can add certain things. The issue of an on-site person, that's something that would be adding things to the code that isn't present in transient hab limited. So I think the commission could not interpret that to be included as part of that. That would be code drafting. But separately, if there was a desire to see a different level of review or approval for these things, that again could be a recommendation by the commission to the board to consider those things going forward. But that's an ordinance to be adopted and not a interpreted resolution. So I just wanted to add on, in terms of where the statement about county council, I think we weren't looking for best interest, but looking at in terms of what we can or can't do under this type of proceeding in terms of what the commission's authority is. Separate and apart from that, on the noticing issue, that kind of gets to Commissioner Pollen to where we're at here. And under the administrative appeals section, which is essentially what this is, the commission did an administrative appeal of a planning director determination that it essentially came to light largely as a part of the prior application last year. And there is no specific notice requirement for that. That being said, the commission wanted to consider doing some form of public notice would have some cost to it if they wanted to simply continue this to a different meeting. So there was an attempt to get more community outreach to make this, make more people aware of it. That is certainly within, I think, the commission's not jurisdiction, but within your powers.
All right. I would like to say something about this issue, and I'll get back to, I see another hand up there. What needs to be understood is that this is going forward. Commissioner Pollen, you mentioned, well, in some of the inland, they're $100 a night vacation rentals, and if they already have a vacation rental and have the appropriate permit for it, they're fine. This is not going to affect them for a major use permit. They're grandfathered in. So this is going forward. And I really want to point out, I understand we have some rural areas and we represent different areas. I get that. But it's not just the coast. You have to look at Anderson Valley. They're having a housing crisis. It's a go-to destination, right? And, the Board of Supervisors is, hiring consultants to push tourism. So we have on one hand, the county pushing tourism, and where are we putting those people? So what we're trying to do is protect neighborhoods. That's what we go back to give an opportunity that if you want a vacation rental and you're bringing transient energy up to your place, your neighbors should understand that's happening because they may have a residential zoning on top of it. So it gets back to the land use. That's my, I certainly want people to figure out how to make it, make ends meet, but I think they have to look at the investment to make ends meet with this, just like any other business. And so I'm going to go to Commissioner Jones first, then Commissioner Pollan.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a couple of statements based on what other people have asked or questions people have had. So we did do an analysis of vacation rentals across the county. It is 3% of the housing stock. This is a non-trivial amount of housing. So I'm not exactly sure how big the housing stock is, but it's hundreds and hundreds of units, possibly even 1,000. So that is a big impact on housing availability. So in a housing market, if you have vacancy rates of less than 5%, it's basically considered a landlord's market. Mendocino County has a vacancy rate of less than 1% in housing units. That includes housing units that are available for sale. It is impossible to find a rental if you're trying to move here. Our hospitals cannot attract visiting nurses. They cannot attract physicians. Our police force cannot attract police officers. Our schools cannot attract teachers. Businesses cannot attract employees. It's not just an issue of cost. There's just absolutely no availability. Even if you can pay $3,000 a month to rent a place, it doesn't exist. You can't find it. So this is really trying to address a problem that has resulted from platforms online that allow people to rent vacation rentals very easily. And we have had people come up here and buy multiple units and turn them into distributed hotels. Yes, there are people who rent vacation rentals on their property that they bought, but I would make a statement that anybody who owns multiple properties can probably afford a use permit. Like, I don't buy the I'm too poor to get a use permit argument. Yeah, we could have a free-for-all and just keep seeing multiple houses every year turn over into vacation rentals and end up like Vail, where 80% of the homes are not lived in by permanent residents. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to see that that's where we're headed in many of our communities, not just the coastal zone. And so I think this is not a radical proposal. This is a common sense solution to a serious issue that just requires people, rather than just go in and get a business license and turn a property over into a vacation rental, to actually go through a process that requires neighbor notification. So for those reasons, I think it's really important. I will also just say that by and large, turning a home into a vacation rental would not require a CEQA document and would not require a payment to Fish and Wildlife because it is less than 2,000 square feet. It's reuse of an existing structure and it's not generally considered an intensification of use. So really all you're looking at is the $6,000 to $8,000 use fee permit, which is expensive. I don't argue that it's expensive. I don't know. I operate Jug Handle Creek Farm as a part-time nonprofit executive director, and we have little teeny cabins where you have to go outside and use a different building for a restroom. And we rent them affordably at $60 a night, and they are full all the time. And one of those cabins produces more than $3,000 in income a month. So that's just a really teeny cabin, much less a house. So I think that people can afford this if they want to do it. People are generally not going to be renting out their primary residence. So they already own 2 properties. So I think they can afford it.
All right, I'll get to you, Commissioner Paul, in a minute. I see we have our Julia hand up.
Thank you. So I just wanted to comment on the fees discussion, and I apologize, I forgot about this when we were talking about the cost. So when the county had taken, and this was part of like sort of the history package that we provided to the ad hoc and to the rest of the commission at the end of 2021, the board had given direction to our office to process the major use permits required under the room and board interpretation that didn't have frontage on a publicly maintained road, process them as a major use permit, meaning they're under the jurisdiction of the planning commission, but charge minor use permit fees. So the fee that I quoted at the beginning of this meeting, that's for a straight major use permit. I will need to go back and look at that in that direction that was received and see how that would fit in if this interpretation is this resolution is passed by the planning commission as to whether or not that extends to this commercial use type, the transient habitation lodging limited. But so that's what the board had done in an effort to reduce the cost, but still have that public review process involved. So I apologize, I misquoted that at the beginning here. So for a minor use permit, typically those range between $3,000 to $4,000 for the initial permit cost. And then in terms of CEQA compliance, I don't have all of the major use permits in front of us. I could see there's instances where we do prepare CEQA documentation related to that, the negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration, like I discussed. But also remembering that there is at times the ability to categorically exempt a particular project.
Right.
So I can't say in each circumstance because all sites are different, all circumstances are different as to what would be the appropriate CEQA documentation. But I just wanted to give those couple caveats so I'm not misstating what the anticipated cost could be. It is, there's a range here of what you could potentially see depending on your site circumstances. So thank you.
Commissioner Pollan, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wiedemann. I don't want to be a contrarian here, but I just need to sort of challenge again some assumptions and some things that have been said that strike me as somewhat alarmist. One is the notion of transient energy in a neighborhood. It feels a little dog whistly about, people who are outside of the area, these outsiders that are coming in. And if we're talking about what the impact on a neighborhood is, I would suspect, and I could be wrong about this, but the major impact to the neighbors is the coming and going of vehicles to a location. I'm sure there are some noise issues and other things that could come up, but I would suspect that those issues are as significant or more significant with full-time residents that live in a structure. You're going to have at least as many vehicle trips coming in as you would with a transient. Again, I could be wrong, but that's my presumption. I also want to say that the notion, if it is true that there are 3% of the housing units are in vacation rentals currently, that is a significant amount. But to be 1,000 units, as was Commissioner Jones said that it might be, that would mean that it would have to be, and I don't know this number, maybe the director could have some information, but we would need to have 35, that would be 35,000 units of housing in the county if 3% of them are in this to be 1,000 units. I don't know, again, that feels like a little bit of an overstretch. I also want to say that I don't know that I agree that there is a housing crisis in many parts of the county. And I think that we as a planning commission should be looking at how do we address that. But I am concerned that we are crafting an overly restrictive interpretation here that doesn't actually address that issue. There are many units in this county that sit vacant most of the time, that will continue to sit vacant most of the time if we do this or not. And I think of the village of Mendocino as the prime example in my mind, but I'm sure there are many units like this on the coast that are second homes that are owned by people that are outside of the area that do not rent them on Airbnb or any of this, that are going to continue to be unavailable as housing stock in the county. And so I'm curious about how many units would become available for full-time housing. And again, any number is significant to individuals that live in there, but we have to weigh the impact that this is going to have on people that are trying to do this as a supplementary income. And again, there are many people that have spoken to me that have units that would not be sufficient for a full-time unit that are being utilized in this way. And those units are not going to then become available for people to live in. And again, that's anecdotal. I understand that. It'd be great if we had a little better clarity and granularity on what the actual impact of this interpretation might be. But again, it's really hard for me to move ahead with this without having any public comments coming in for us to consider today. I understand what Deputy County Counsel said, that there would be a cost associated with some sort of a notice, and that we are not obligated to provide that notice. And I understand that that is true, but I think that there is a good faith effort of we as a sort of quasi-legislative body to make sure that the people who could and will be affected by this are noticed. And I know what you said, Commissioner Wiedemann, about people that are being grandfathered in. But I also, again, I've spoke with several constituents that have had a very hard time, for whatever reason, the inner machinations of county bureaucracy about getting into the system in the proper way so that they would be grandfathered in, and who have been doing these activities in a way that, has presented no issue to their neighbors and would be a big impact on them. And I would love, again, I feel remiss that I feel like I'm here speaking on behalf of people who have spoken to me, and that's not necessarily my role. I wish that people were here speaking on behalf of themselves to explain their particular situations. And in such, I would be advocating for continuing this to a later date so that we could hear more from the public who might be impacted on this. But I just I just wanted to point out some of those issues that I'm feeling. Again, I want to address this issue, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't penalize people who are trying to just do this in a good way.
And I'm just going to say something very quick to what you referred to, Commissioner Pollan, and then I'll pass it to Commissioner Jones. The hands up. I want to say, are you aware that you need a major use permit if you're not off of a county road right now? Right now. So I'm going to say something here. So maybe several people who are in these rural areas who are not on county roads are not able to get a permit unless they already have to come forward with the major use permit process. And I want to be clear, right now, anybody whose property does not touch a county road needs a major use permit. That's existing. So when I hear people talk about, well, I can't get the permits, something's wrong. I don't know how to go through a permit process, right? But they can figure out how to do Airbnb or, so I just have to say, maybe they have to go through a major use permit as is. Right, because they're not off of a county road. And I would suspect, different districts, when I look at what districts we represent, there's a lot of outgrowth off of what I'm going to call, rural roads that aren't county roads, private roads. So I just wanted to comment that if the fellow commissioners don't understand right now, we have a major use permit process for most of the land in the county. Okay, so all we're doing is making the playing field fair. for if your property borders a county road. And I'm going to go back historically because I would say when this started, the interpretation changed. It was always off of a county road. You needed a major use permit for any of it. And that got changed throughout when we did a change of the general plan. So I pass it to the hands up, Commissioner Jones. You're muted.
Sorry, my computer just did the thing where I have to do Windows security and log in, and meanwhile I can't get to the mute button. So again, Cliff, I do appreciate your questions. They're really good ones. I looked up quick facts, Mendocino County, California. There are 41,552 residential housing units as of July 1st, 2021. If you multiply that times 3%, it's 1,246 vacation rentals in the county. The map that the Housing Advisory Committee did was incredibly interesting to me. And if we want to bring this back, I think that's fine. I'm game with that. I'm game with bringing it back and doing public hearing. I think that's important. I think it is an important issue, but I also really appreciated Diana's comment that we're making a level playing field. People on public roads and people on private roads now have to follow the same process. I also think that there are some people who probably are renting out things as vacation rentals that are not actually habitable from a legal perspective. And so they would never be able to get legalized. They can't get legalized now. They can't get legalized in the future. If you don't have good, like, build to code, basic stuff, a closet, egress that's safe, no lofts, yada, yada. So I think that that's also an issue that's playing into this in terms of people being able to legalize. Mendocino County has always had sort of a renegade culture or subculture that has engaged in many illegal activities over the year, and that will continue. I don't think this ordinance is going to impact them either way, frankly. They're illegal now. They'll continue to be illegal until someone turns them in and someone has to go do code enforcement on it. Like, this doesn't change that. So I also feel like it's fine to notice it. So maybe we can, as a commission, just direct staff to do that. I also think it would be great if our chair were here, because I'd much rather have this be a vote of the full commission. And if it doesn't pass, I understand, Diana and I tried to do something, the rest maybe don't agree, and that's okay. But I think it's important to also look at the consequences of doing nothing, as well as the consequences of doing something. And the consequences of doing nothing is basically a free-for-all, where we're getting units turning over into vacation rentals every day in this county. And it means that people can't find housing. And that is a very important consideration. Those people don't come to these meetings because they're not even plugged in. They're young people who are trying to leave home and still live in their community, and they can't find a place to live. And to me, that's really just trying to put a very small break on this really big change in our community. So I will stop, but and I will make a motion. I don't know, do we need a motion, or can we just provide direction to staff? Matthew?
County Council.
Do we need a motion?
We have a question to you on how do we go forward if we want to continue?
We want to continue and maybe have a notice in the paper. So do I need to make a motion to do that, or can we just provide direction to staff to do that?
Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, I think it would just be direction to staff. And I saw Ms. Krog raise her hand to let her chime in a moment as well. But my initial thoughts were it wouldn't be a continuance. If we're going to notice it, we're going to notice it. And I think given that I see an absence of direction in the code about how to do so, to provide some leeway to staff as to how to accomplish that, given that any noticing is at this point kind of just borne by the county on its own. And then Ms. Krog, whatever your comments are.
Thank you. So I just want, so you're aware, I I would need some direction on what type of notice we're talking about. And I just want to give you context. Each legal notice in a newspaper is a minimum of about $350 for the department. So typically that's built into our application permit costs. So that way we make sure we're getting cost recovery for the department. At this point, that'll be just coming straight out of the county's budget, the department's budget. So just being mindful in terms of the number of notices being done and how to provide that type of notice. Because if we're talking about affected area, I mean, typically when we have an ordinance, we publish in one newspaper of general circulation. We would not publish in all newspapers. So, you know, that's just something to have in mind. And I would want probably a little time to think about what the best method is. And also any suggestions you may have on if we do a newspaper, which newspaper would be the preferable newspaper, given that this affects pretty much the entirety of the county.
All right. So I'm going to put it back to the commission to one last round of discussion on this. After we've heard everything being presented. And because I don't think this is that big of a change, but I'll go to Commissioner Pollan. You have your hand up.
Thank you, Vice Chair Weedman. I just as a potential suggestion, and Director Krog, you could let me know if this seems way off base, but people who are in the system right now are required to pay transient occupancy tax. And the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office sends letters to all of those people requiring them to pay that tax on I believe it's a quarterly basis. So I'd imagine they have a database of all of those individuals. And that probably goes out also to people who are hotels and the Jug Handle Creek Farm and all places like that, who might also be interested in weighing in, because I know that they are impacted by the proliferation of these types of rentals as well. And I don't know what a postcard campaign I don't know how many people are on that database, but that would be a targeted way of letting people know who are impacted by this, who are in the system right now and who may know other people in the system, as a way to put it out there, as opposed to a notice in the newspaper, which again, I think in this day and age, unfortunately, newspapers are not the best way to reach individuals.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollan. I'm going to comment back, and I'll go to Commissioner Jones, if I may. That's a what would we call it? Cherry picking? Commissioner Pollan, that's cherry picking. If it's going to be noticed, it goes public. Why would we just notice the people who already has permits, who's already doing the TOT, right? So I would definitely not support that. If we're going to make it public, we go public. We spend the money and go public, and one might call it, let it rip. You know. So then I see Commissioner Jones. I'll pass back.
Thank you. So Cliff, I feel like that was a little bit of a veiled statement that somehow I have a conflict of interest, which I just want to respond to directly. And that is that Jug Handle is a nonprofit. I receive a very marginal wage from it. I make much more money from my consulting business. I do it as a public service. All of the people who stay there pay below market rates. And mostly we serve school groups. So I just want to clarify that with you, that I don't feel like I have any conflict of interest here whatsoever. In fact, I don't think we compete with Airbnb in general, because we are mostly camping in cabins. So I just needed to clarify that. And I will also say that I think notifying just people who have this permit, again, confuses the issue. The issue is not about people who have a permit. It's about people who want a permit, who are going to convert existing housing into a vacation rental. So I feel strongly that this needs to be noticed in a paper, because it affects employers, it affects families who want their kids to be able to stay here. It affects a much broader community of interest. I also think we are making a mountain out of a molehill here. The change we're making is pretty minor compared to what's there now. It's definitely a on the margins edge. But I also think it's beautiful that we have like conflict in this planning commission meeting and we have different perspectives. I think that's awesome. And I think that our different perspectives also reflect the different perspectives in our community as a whole about kind of in a weird way where our community is going. You know, are we going to become a community of just, I don't know, geared towards the vacationer, or do we have an economic need that's separate from that? So I think it's a really interesting discussion. And what I would recommend, Julia, is rather than doing a typical notice, is to actually take out one of the smallest ads and do a little like ad, like a workshop ad instead, because I think that would get more people. Very few people read the noticing. I would just say like the really weird nerds read notices, honestly. So I would actually recommend a kind of different approach. And then maybe we could also just amongst ourselves, you know, invite people in on this conversation, just the people that we know who care about housing or care about the freedom to rent out anything you want for a vacation rental. And then we could have a bigger conversation. I think that's lovely and rich and kind of interesting.
Commissioner Pollan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wiedemann. Well, first off, I want to apologize, Commissioner Jones. It was not my intent to imply that you had a conflict of interest or to besmirch you in any way. I know that working in a volunteer capacity is a labor of love. And I have great appreciation for Jug Handle Farm. I think you all are doing a great service there. I said that because I know in the past when Airbnb has been a topic of conversation, that people like hotels have had a vested interest in speaking to that issue because it does impact their ability to provide for their livelihood as well. So that's the only reason. And I'm not attached to the TOT notice. It was just a suggestion, and I'm happy to let that one go. I think that I agree with Commissioner Jones that the legal notice section, it's nerds and attorneys that read those. And they're not likely to be the people who are going to comment at a meeting like this. And I think that if it was, even if we only did a legal notice of that type, I think Commissioner Jones' suggestion to reach out to constituents that have contacted us who have concerns about this for a variety of reasons, to have that variety of opinions present is really helpful. And to the mountain out of a molehill comment, I don't mean to blow this out of proportion, and I apologize if it feels like my comments have done so. This is a very, I think this is a fundamental question, as Commissioner Jones stated, about where are we going as a county? And I think that this obviously is being thought of as something on the margins as we move towards, hopefully a more inclusive ordinance that looks at this in its totality, which I would hope is also part of the larger question of how do we provide housing stock for residents of Mendocino County, which again, I agree is a critical issue. But I just want to make sure that we're not sort of starting to steer the ship in a direction that we might be remiss to go in down the road, especially, again, I'm speaking from one person's perspective only of hearing from a few members of the public, and I would love to hear from a more diverse cross-section of the public on this particular topic and on the topic at large before we start setting the course of our rudder.
All right.
So if I may, Vice Chair Wiedemann.
Yes.
I just want to comment. So I hear desire for public notice. I think between myself and council internally, we can talk about what type of notice that is to be provided. I understand there may be a desire for something in the newspaper, and then I have a few thoughts that I'll be looking into on how we could provide notice in other means as well. So that way the word gets out for whatever meeting this would be coming back at. I don't want to say it'll be back at the October 6th meeting because I think I need to think about what that timeline is for notice, but we can certainly share that with the commissioners so you guys can also do outreach to, folks that may be interested as well. So I just want to note that I hear that direction and we'll work on that internally here to get that notice out. So.
All right. And I do just want to say, I think when we look at the county map and what district we're representing, I think things kind of, I represent the 5th district, which is like go-to from people out of the county, out of the state. So we all have different overlays, and I understand the more rural districts, right? I hear their concerns, right? Make a living, how we piece it together, right? But keep a rural character. I hear that. Okay, so I think we still need to give a direction, I believe, County Council to the staff. Is that correct, Matt? I see your hand up.
Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski. I'll also acknowledge Commissioner Jones's hand went up first, but yes, I did want to kind of get confirmation from all 4 commissioners, or majority of them, of the direction to give the staff today. I'm not sure we've heard necessarily a majority in terms of what direction to go.
That's right. Yeah, may not pass. So Commissioner Jones.
Right. So 2 things. One, it feels a little bit like we need to have more than just a sort of a naked resolution, if I could use that phrase. And so I was thinking, just hearing all the comments that people have, I've took notes. I'd be happy to try and take off my hat of commissioner and put on a hat of a staff person and do a non-political, non-biased perspective of trying to answer some of the questions that came up, like, where are the vacation rentals? How many units are we talking about? What are the permit fees? And some of that I could work with Julia on, just so that that's also part of the record. So everybody is working from the same information, because I think it's easy for us to throw stuff out, but then if you actually confirm what's realistic and true, and you can read it and you can look up links on your own and see it, it's helpful. So that was one comment that I was willing to put a little more time into this, because I think it's worth it. And then the other comment I wanted to make is that I would like to just say, yes, please do something like a postcard advertisement almost, rather than a notice, because I don't think we have to notice this. It's more like informing the community. And let's go for a date certain, maybe a month or 2 in the future, in terms of when this meeting would come back, so that we have time to basically let people know that it's happening. I wouldn't want it to happen that I find out 3 days before that this meeting is going to happen, and then I have to scramble and get people engaged, if that makes sense. And it maybe doesn't have to be 2 months out, but you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah. If you're looking for a date certain, I would say certainly not earlier than the October 20th agenda, which is about a month out. But anyway, just that would be my at least suggestion, and give time to be able to get that information together and out in a reasonable amount of time to the public.
And I am not going to be here for the October 20th. That's my planned vacation. It falls on it. So I would like to move it to November if possible, since I've been working on this issue, and I'd like to be present for it and have my district represented. So that said, maybe we could try to get a date in November if that works for you, Julia.
It looks like the first meeting in November would be November 3rd. We can also, because we'll have time between now and then, my suggestion would be let staff work on this a little bit internally, and we could possibly have a discussion, or at least during the matters from staff or director's report, provide that date during one of the commission hearings. So that way we get a chance to just sort of look at what we have going internally. Because certainly if there's it seems like if there is a large amount of public interest in this, we want to make sure that it's an agenda day that we can really accommodate public interest as well, and a robust discussion amongst the commissioners.
Okay, all right. So do we just continue this item then to, that's the question I have. How do we move forward? County Council, Matt?
Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, I will defer to Commissioner Jones, but I think that what we're looking for is possibly, a majority vote for direction to staff to bring this item back at a future planning commission meeting after providing a certain amount of public notice regarding this meeting which will be determined by staff and brought back with an update perhaps at a future commission meeting.
The only thing I would add is it's not a hearing, so you don't have to continue it. It's just an agenda item.
All right. Okay. So do I have a motion?
Yeah, sure. I'll move that we discuss this item further at the November 3rd meeting, unless staff needs additional time, in which case they'll notify us. And that we have a small postcard size or smaller geographically interesting advertisement in what paper? Because you said you only wanted one, right?
Typically we do the Ukiah Daily Journal is our most common.
That's fine.
Paper. Yeah.
I think if that's typical, that's what you do. And of course that means on the coast, Diana and I will have to do a lot more outreach because nobody here reads that.
What about the ADA? That kind of cross.
That can certainly be possible as well too.
I think that would be a good cross section.
Do you think the AVA has the circulation that would, I mean, again, if we're paying to get this out, I'm curious, do we have any idea what the circulation numbers are?
Well, I don't think people buy the Ukiah Daily Journal sister papers on the coast anymore. They're like 2 pages. I don't know, we definitely need it someplace else. I just thought, yes, Commissioner Babini.
I think part of Matt's suggestion of allowing staff time to bring it back at the next meeting on what and their findings of which would be the best vehicle for this. And so maybe not recommending today which vehicle to utilize for noticing, but allowing staff time to figure out what would be the best vehicle for that.
I agree with that.
I agree. Good point, Commissioner Babini. Okay.
I don't know. I think I want to stick with a skywriting campaign only.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, right. I made the motion, so someone else has to second.
I will second that motion.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Everybody's no further discussion. Can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Pollan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Babini,
Yes.
Chair Wiedemann.
Yes. All right. Now that took a lot longer than I thought. So,
Thank you all for taking the time on it. I think it is important.
right. Yes. No. That's our job, I guess, as commissioners. With that, now we're moving into there was no matters from, well, I guess I'll ask again, any matters from staff?
No matters from staff today. Thank you.
All right. We do have, moving to matters from the commission, we do have an item that was, I don't know if it's, I'm sorry, I got a little lost in my.
Diana, it's only on the website. That's why you can't find it in your paper document. You have to go to the website to look at it.
No, I have my written thing here, but what we have here is we have from matters of commission, which I'm going to, is we have a Mendocino City Community Service District letter that was sent to us. And has everybody read that letter from the Ryan Rhodes. And why don't we bring that up for discussion? Since it's a matters for, he directed it directly to the commission.
And Vice Chair Wiedemann, would you like for me to give a little context to that?
Yes, that would be
Yeah,
great.
okay.
I was hoping you would with staff the one before. But go ahead.
Absolutely. So on July 14th, I believe it was, the Board of Supervisors met to review essentially an ordinance related to water extraction and water hauling. And this was presented by the Drought Ad Hoc Committee. And at that time, the board reviewed it, provided some comments, but then directed that ordinance essentially be reviewed first by council and county staff, and then sent to the Planning Commission for review and input. So what you're seeing, this letter from the City Community Services District, this has been essentially them providing some initial comments, but you have not yet seen the document that it's in reference to come before you. I have done a little outreach with County Council's office to just get an update in terms of where it's at in terms of review. And we'll look at what our scheduling may look like coming forward. Oh, and I see it looks like we just lost Commissioner Babini here on the meeting. I'm unsure if she'll be able to maybe just hit the wrong button here. So anyway, that's a little bit of context for this particular letter that came in, noting that I think it was really meant to be under public expression, and I apologize for not calling that out during the public expression portion of the meeting.
All right. And so since we we're looking at this, where do we want to, because it ties into an ordinance at some point. And so how do we do we just note that we received it?
Essentially, yes. I think at this point you've received the letter. We will make sure that it is included in any packet that comes forward in the future. So you get a chance to look at that again.
Right.
And of course, that would be a meeting that has, is provided on it would be agendized properly for discussion on it. So really no discussion is necessary on this letter today. And I will just note for the record that Commissioner Babini has rejoined the meeting here.
Okay.
And so in any case, I don't think there needs to be discussion on this.
All right. And seeing that there are no hands up, I'm going to move us to approval of minutes, August 18th.
If I may, Vice Chair Wiedemann, we did have an item under matters from Commission 8A regarding discussion of a possible amendment.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's back up. So going back to matters from Commission 8A, discussion and possible action regarding an amendment to the Planning Commission bylaws to limit the number of times the project may be continued before the project would require renoticing. And staff, would you like to?
Yes, please. So first off, I'd like to apologize to the commission. I had anticipated having time to put together a memorandum for today's meeting with noticing costs, etc. I did not have the opportunity to do so due to my schedule this last couple weeks. But so I can give you a verbal sort of discussion on the costs associated with this, and then what staff is thinking in terms of where we place this new rule or the suggested new rule. And then of course, staff drafted some tentative language, which obviously can pop up on the screen and we can discuss amongst the commissioners. So in terms of public hearings, so when the planning commission schedule is set for the year, essentially staff is accounting that the commission would meet every meeting that is listed on the calendar, every first and third Thursday of the month. So in holding a meeting where there is only one item or an item that is continued is really at no additional expense to what was budgeted for the department. So staff is never really concerned about the fact when the commission meets and may have to continue an item and so meets only very briefly to do so. Now, in terms of noticing costs, depending on the project and the type of project, the noticing costs can differ because we do notice adjacent landowners as well as occupants within proximity to any project. And typically that's 300 feet. It can be all the way out to 1,000. And then in the case of like agricultural preserves, it's actually within 1 mile, any property owner that is in an agricultural preserve. So there's a variable cost here in terms of what is actually required to renotice a project. And that's why it is very project specific. As I said earlier when we were discussing notice, a typical newspaper notice is about $350 for each newspaper that you notice within. And then as you know, postage is, I believe it's at 60 cents now today. So then you have a 60-cent cost for each adjacent landowner or occupant that you are providing legal notice to. So what I intend to do from a staff perspective is, one, I think it's a great idea to have the Planning Commission bylaws address a time period when renoticing would be required. But I think that it's more going to need to come from a department practice and policy in terms of how we address how that cost is determined and how that is collected from an applicant. So what I have prepared in the draft bylaws for you today is Rule 14, which would have for continued public hearings, and I can pop this up on the screen just so we're all looking at the same document. Which states that continued public hearing items on the agenda may be continued to a date certain at the request of the applicant for no more than 3 consecutive meetings prior to requiring that the project be renoticed pursuant to the provisions of applicable provisions of county and state regulations. And I realize that that has duplicate provisions in there, so we might be able to take one of those out. But this would leave a little bit of leeway too for the department to determine what those costs are on the back end, but also provides that this being within the rules portion, that the commission, say you have a particular instant where you're taking a tentative motion. I'll use an example. Say you're taking a tentative motion, but want to see an alternate resolution for denial or approval of a project prepared. But don't believe that it needs to be renoticed. There is the ability for a rule to be waived with a majority vote of the commission to do so. So that way you're not locking it in case you have specific circumstances where you may want to make an exception to that. And I see Deputy County Counsel has raised his hand as well. So I'll let him comment on that.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, a clarifying point. We did talk about bylaws versus rules, and at some point, we can probably see if there's actually a rigid boundary between those two. For suspension or amendment of the rules, it wouldn't be a majority, it would be a supermajority vote. That's in Rule 12.
Thank you for that clarification. So basically where staff sees this going is the commission including a rule, and you can of course, play around with this, what the commission feels is the most appropriate. Staff has drafted this for 3 consecutive meetings and also clearly at the request of the applicant, because staff would like to be able and would hope the commission would support instances where staff may require continuance and not be subject to necessarily this rule on renoticing unless, directed to do so. So that's my presentation starting point, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen just so you can see each other. So.
All right. Thank you, Julia. Any commissioners have any comments? I see Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, I just feel like I should weigh in here since it was sort of my thoughts that brought this forward. I guess for me, it's an interesting issue for me because I feel like there's 2 different things we're trying to achieve with this. One is when a project gets so far away from the original public hearing in time that people are no longer aware of it moving forward anymore. So like that's one issue you want to solve, like, I don't know, some cell tower down in Manchester, for example. Nobody's really aware of it anymore because it's been continued so many times. So that's one issue. And then the other issue is this issue of continuing to a date certain when you don't have anything else on the agenda. And I think with the Zoom, it's only slightly inconvenient. But I think if we actually were meeting in person and had to drive to a meeting, in Diana's, in my case, an hour and a half each direction, where we're basically not doing anything, you probably wouldn't see us come, and you might get into a situation where you don't have quorum. So I'm not sure if this is the best mechanism to solve both of their problems. I feel to a certain degree that this mechanism definitely solves the problem where an application has gotten further and further away from a situation where the public may have a big interest in the project and therefore it should be renoticed. I think the other aspect to this, I would prefer staff to deal with themselves, like looking at your calendar ahead and see, and because you know in your minds, like probably we may or may not have something at the next meeting, and just not allowing us to de facto just continue something to the next meeting. If you kind of think you may not have anything but that, you could say, well, let's continue it, 2 meetings from now or 3 meetings from now when I'm sure I have a project. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but that's just kind of my thinking about it.
I would like to just say, I think staff has a timeline when it comes to cell towers, that you have to, am I wrong with that?
You're
Julia?
correct. There's a shot clock requirement
Right.
through federal law.
Yes, and I think that's what's made these kind of complicated, why we have to keep posting them, so to speak. But maybe there's a remedy for that. Any suggestions, Julia or County Council?
Well, so I think certainly, and I hear from Commissioner Jones about the one item agenda. I do think that's more of like a staff practice and less so something that would be written into rules or bylaws at all. I do think that what staff has drafted would address the instance where you have something being continued so many times that, as Commissioner Jones put it, the public that may be interested is not really aware that that's coming forward anymore. So, I certainly have heard the commission before talk about not doing one item agendas. I know we talked about that with the meeting today, where when the commission wanted to continue this to the next agenda, I stated I wanted to be clear that this would be the only item on that agenda, other than possibly some bylaw items. So that could provide then at least having, so you can decide also with your time whether or not it's appropriate to go to that next agenda or to wait for a subsequent agenda. Now, what I can't factor in is, things come up. So sometimes we have an agenda set and we've got numerous projects, and for a variety of reasons, those may be continued. So, that's just the nature of public hearings and this process of going through public hearings with the discourse from the applicant, staff, and agencies, and the public. So, of course, we can try to perfect the system, but it won't always be perfect. So.
Commissioner Jones.
So I have an idea about changing the Rule 14 and allowing more flexibility. So rather than saying it may only be continued for 3 consecutive meetings, how about if we say something like can only be continued within a 6-month time frame? And then if they're outside of that 6-month time frame, then they would need to renotice, because that gets rid of the problem of the issue becoming stale. And maybe 6 months isn't the right number. Maybe it's 3 months. And then just rely on staff to try and address the other issue about having meetings with nothing on them but continuances. And I respect the fact that you can't know what's going to happen. And I think we all understand that. It's just that we had like quite a number right in a row, and this one applicant who, I don't know, had 6 or 7 continuances, and it was just kind of ridiculous at that point. Because I also think there is a hidden cost to that, and that is all the time that you guys spend doing the memo, doing the report, and then the time that administrative staff spend updating everything. And that is a real cost. It's not maybe an out-of-pocket cost, but it's a cost of your attention and your workload that is not trivial. And I don't know. What do people think about that idea of either a 3 or 6 month time period in which something would need to be renoticed if it's been continued for that long of a period?
I defer back to staff on that, staff and county council.
Well, I think this is really sort of a, kind of like a policy decision by the commission that I can't necessarily answer. What I will say is I would assume that would be from the initial hearing date, not the date of the notice, because often notice occurs sometimes as far as 30 days in advance of a hearing. And just to keep in mind, so if you say 3 months, that provides the possible ability for potentially up to 6 meetings of the Planning Commission during that time period. 6 months would be, potentially 12 meetings of the Planning Commission. So that just gives you an idea of what, number of continuances you could be looking at during that time period. So, and as an example, since I know it was mentioned, we've had a couple projects recently that have been continued numerous times. I think those would be actually within that 3-month timeline, as well as a 6-month timeline. So, that's just to keep in mind the sort of the real world examples of what you've seen recently. And I see council has his hand raised as well.
Yes. County council.
So Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, just some additional context in thinking about, how I interact with planning and building on how we set things. Sometimes when people want it to go to the next meeting, that doesn't typically actually offer a lot of additional time. That's really only a handful of work days. We can get it on an agenda for sure, but that's what leads to sometimes having to post it after the agenda is posted because it's not done yet. So it's a practice where we can work not just internally inside the department or with the commission, but also with applicants that, not encouraging them not to just do the next meeting. If we are still working at issues with an applicant, to say it really has to go one more beyond that. So it wouldn't be all 6 necessarily in that 3 months, but that's also a policy issue that we can work on with or without a bylaw or a rule change.
Yeah,
Commissioner Jones.
I feel a little bit like just some awareness here is more useful than having a rule change. And because I just worry that a rule change is going to have unintended consequences that are annoying to staff. I don't know what other people feel like, but I would be happy to just let this one pass into the night and just, I think staff has heard us. I think we've expressed our desire to try and have things continue to a more realistic time frame of when they would actually be ready. And I think if we're doing that, then we don't need all this other stuff.
Excellent. And so one comment I can make is that I can be prepared with each meeting to have in front of me what projects are tracking for certain agendas. Now, depending how far out we get in the future, because it's tracking doesn't mean it will make that agenda.
Right.
So there could still be that we run into challenges that way. But, again, we can just try to get closer to this, knowing that it's not going to be a perfect system because it just can't be given the nature of what you guys hear at these meetings. So.
And I think that's an excellent idea, Julia. And just for us also to understand the tracking part, if you can just say, hey, these are the next, with 3 months ahead, this is where we are, what we're looking at, what's on our desk. We don't know exactly the calendar, but these are the issues that we know are coming forward. That would be very helpful to me personally. With this, do we just need a motion do we need any kind of, if we're not going to use it, do we need to just how do we just let it die?
I think I'm going to look to council for response on that.
Deputy County Council Matt Kudrowski, I think if there wants to get some kind of a motion of agreement from the majority of the commission is to take no action. If no one wants to make a motion, then separately, I think we could just say there was no motion and move on to the next agenda item.
All right. Does anybody want to make a motion to take no action? Okay. With that, then we'll move on to the next agenda item. There you go. Now we're going to approval of minutes, and that is for the August 18th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Can I have roll call?
Commissioner Jones,
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pollan,
Yes.
Commissioner Babini,
Yes.
Chair Wiedemann.
Yes. And with that, I invite a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Do I have a second?
I'll
I heard
second
it.
it.
All right. All those in favor? Raise your
Aye.
hand. Aye. All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good weekend coming up. And thank you for the lively discussions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diana.
Take care.
Bye,
y'all.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.